Hello, good afternoon, everyone. And once again, a very warm welcome to the, a milestone webinar for us. This is our 25th webinar in the series. We started this series, we never named it a logical talk when we started. It was more started when Anurag and I um, were discussing on some of the important changes in the labor laws, and we decided to do a webinar. It was more of one-time initiative, wherein we thought, okay, this is an important subject which everybody needs to understand and know about. And we did our first webinar on in May 2023. While that had always been our uh, aspiration that we wanted to continue doing these webinar series, because people were when they were reading our articles, the blogs, procedures, there were a lot of requests which were coming in also from our system users, from the industry, that we should do some of these webinars. Um, but unfortunately, it never happened. So, higher pension scheme was our first webinar, which we did on I think it was 18th of May 2023.
Right.
When we did this first webinar. And here we are with your support. We've continued the series ever after. And here we are back with our 25th webinar. And thank you so much for being such an amazing audience who have always appreciated the effort, given us critical feedbacks wherever required, uh, given us thoughts to improvise, thoughts to also pick up the right topics. And not just that, also have been participating in our journey as a speaker, as a guest writers over these years. And very happy that today Logical Talk from Lawrbit has become a platform to share knowledge, to have discussion on different topics. Um, and on this occasion, I would also want to I want you to meet our colleagues who are behind the scene, who have ensured these webinars go happen every month, and we have a topic which is which is a hot topic for that time, which is basically the feedback from the users. So they talk to users, they talk to clients, they take the feedbacks, they propose different subjects, different ideas, and then basis collective decision, we finalize the topic, we finalize the right set of speakers. So in this process, we speak to a lot of people, understand their comfort with those subjects, prepare, and this preparation for each webinar goes for at least 3 weeks, around 20 days of effort goes uh, towards preparation of each of these webinars. So I want you to, Trishul, are you there? I can't see you.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, can you? Okay. So I want you to meet my colleague Trishaljeet Singh. She's the force behind ensuring that these webinars happens month on month, every month. Um, and thank you, Trishal, for ensuring this happens repeatedly. And as in the last webinar, we heard from speakers that this is 25th we are reaching. We want to see it 100th also. So let's ensure we add more spice, we had more content, more thoughts in these series, and continue with this effort hereafter.
Thank you so much, sir. And this acknowledgement means a lot. And what means a lot is that there are people who have, given us this opportunity and made us feel that we are promising enough to, attend it like every month. So this has made it ever more special for me and for my team.
Thank you. And I also want to introduce so Akshat, there's Nikita, there's Himanshi, um, there's Mukesh, um, Kuldeep, Rajat. They are playing different roles. Gaurav, this is part of our Community Connect team. There were others also who played very crucial roles, like Ankita. They played an important role in ensuring that you are aware. We are picking the right topic. we're preparing the right content, you're aware of it, you're well informed from a technology perspective, from a design perspective. And I want to thank all of them to ensure this is happening month on month. And Anurag, I think a lot of credit goes to you. Had you not picked up the first topic of fire pension scheme, brought Sanjay sir, Adarsh sir on this discussion, we wouldn't have seen the 25th one.
No, I think thanks Lawrbit for providing this platform uh, to cover whatever is the current trend happening in tax, social security, regulatory arena, and it is quite important to highlight to highlight the companies and the relevant stakeholders because the situation is quite dynamic. Every week or so, we keep on receiving new notifications, circulars, some landmark rulings also come into picture. As a result of which, I think as a consultant, as a subject matter expert, it is our duty to provide these updates to the establishments, to the relevant stakeholder, to make them aware that what are these changes and how it is going to be impacting them as an organization as well as their employee as well.
Thank you. And thanks everyone. Now let's get started with our discussion. And like always, I'll do a bit of my customary slide while I'm sure you all know about it right now by now. Um, Lawbit offers global regulatory compliance management solutions. That's our key product, which helps organization know, understand their regulations, their compliances, their obligations better. Uh, it has the workflow which helps you track, monitor the compliances at every stakeholder level. The software comes with the regulatory updates on the real-time basis as and when the changes are happening. Our team sits, analyzes every small change, every notification, and in the process of our journey from last almost 7 years, when this product was launched, we have read more than 1 million pages of law, and today the software is being used by um, 450 plus enterprises, 3,000 across 3,000 plus locations. And we have a team which is, sorry, this is a slightly older data point. We have a team of now almost 95 people. We are touching 100 very soon. And the software is being used by clients, not just in India, but for the global operations as well. So that's a bit about ourselves, and let's move to the discussions. So Anurag, I'm sure those who have been attending and specifically coming back for an HR webinars on HR topics by now know Anurag well. Anurag is the chartered accountant and the partner and co-founder in by the Books Consulting. He is an ex-Big Four with 20 plus years of experience and has worked very thoroughly on various, on HR domain, understanding the nitty-gritties, compliances, what are the practical and scenarios, and he has consulted to hundreds of firms, not just in India but globally as well. He has a very strong hold on PF authorities, international worker compliances, surrender of trust exemptions. Which is very recently, a lot of organizations, very large sizes have decided to surrender their trust. Uh, it was a lot of pain for organization because there are a lot of compliances process you have to be followed, and he has helped many clients on those lines. Okay, so today's discussion point is labor codes. We have all been hearing about labor codes, and when I was looking back, when we wrote our first article on labor codes, I think it was 2020, towards the end of the 2020, we wrote our first article. It's almost 5 years and still in waiting. Suddenly, in the last few months, things have picked up pace. And somebody had mentioned it may not see light because of the political reason, but I think because of the political reason, also there is some movement happening. And Anurag and I were doing one session for a client. And there was an awareness session on the labor codes. We realized there were a lot of misconception, a lot of areas people needed to know about this labor codes.
So that's when we decided to do this webinar and at least bring some bit of an understanding, basic
Mm.
understanding about what are the labor code, what are the 4 different codes, what are the important aspects which you need to keep in mind. In this discussion today, we will go into slightly more nitty-gritties also in terms of how the wages have to be calculated, what are the various components, and how it is impacting. It's a very, very vast topic. I don't think in 1 hour, 1 hour 15 minutes we can do justice with this subject. But idea is let's understand so that you are aware as to which areas you need to start focusing on. That's the whole agenda for the discussion today. So I would request Anurag to now take over and enlighten us with his understanding.
Yeah.
Anurag?
Thanks, Jayant, and hi everyone. Welcome to today's webinar on the labor codes. And as Jayant highlighted, the reason why we are taking this webinar is basically, though the legislations are dating back to 2019, was when Code on Wages came into picture, and then we had other 3 codes in 2020. But we are standing in the 2025, and still all these 4 labor codes are yet to come into effect. Of course, few here and there, some sections of the code on social security has been notified and has been put into effect, but there were some other reasons behind those things. So we'll dwell into those aspects as well. But by and large, what exactly is labor codes is something that it subsumes the 29 existing legislations, labor law legislations. It can be legislations like Provident Fund, Maternity Benefit Act, Gratuity Act, Industrial Relations, Industrial Standing Orders. So all these central labor law legislations have now been subsumed. I won't say this is, very, very it is a kind of a evolving legislation. It's not typically what we called as a old wine in a new bottle, but this is something which was the need of the hour for a country like India, wherein now we have different category of employees. We have seen gig workers coming into picture. We have those platform workers. We have home-based workers. We have unorganized workers. And what I think the government realized, that all these labor law legislations were dating, most of them were dating back to pre-independence era. And now with the dynamic scenario and the way the Indian market is evolving, it was high time for the government to bring these legislations. The debate on such labor codes have been, I think it is more than a decade old. Uh, and finally, I think in 2019, 2020, based on the recommendations by the various committee, these labor codes came into, wherein the presidential assent was received. So just to give you a very, very high level overview of what exactly are the labor codes, as I was telling, 29 existing legislations have been subsumed under the 4 labor codes, which is the Code on Wages, the OSHW code, the Code on Social Security, and the Industrial Relations Code. Now, what was the main objectives of bringing these codes into picture? One was the uniformity of definitions, and this is a big sort of like change, because right now, if you go into the Employee State Insurance Act, the PF Act, Gratuity Act, just to give you an example, the term wages has been defined differently in each of these legislations. Now, when you have the same terminology but defined in a different manner, it leads to inconsistencies, it leads to interpretation issues, it leads to good amount of litigation. So what these labor codes are planning to do is basically bring a uniformity in the definitions. Typically definitions like wages, establishments, employer, employee, contract, employees, all these have been uniformly defined in these labor codes. And so uh, once these labor codes come into effect, it would become much more easier for the organization to interpret these legislations and then do the necessary compliance around it. So in order to do the ease of compliance, the labor codes would also put a lot of emphasis on the technology part as well. And the technology part will come into picture because we have already seen Shram Suvidha portal coming into picture, wherein now the organizations can basically file returns through that particular portal. So it will be a single unified portal by which the labor law related compliance is expected to be done. The organizations will be, instead of filing the multiple returns, there will be a simplified format of return filing, which will ease the compliance. So the government is putting a lot of emphasis on the technology part, and that technology has a offshoot in terms of the accountability and transparency as well. Because the minute everything will be paperless, everything will be digitized, there will be much more accountability on the organizations to do the compliance. There will be a greater level of transparency as well, because organizations can see from the government side where they would be able to see whether the compliance has been done or not, and then accordingly raise those level of notices and those inquiries digitally. There will be also be a concept of random inspection, which will be again by the relevant technology tool that the government will be deploying, picking cases for scrutiny, sending electronic, somewhat akin to what we are doing, seeing happening in the income tax or the GST arena. Somewhat typical to that only is something that the government would plan to do for labor codes. And for the effective enforcement, because what we generally see is in terms of the labor law legislations is there are a lot of legislation, but the enforcement is something that is quite missing. Because if we see how the POSH legislation, although POSH is not forming a part of the labor code, but just to give you an idea of any other legislation like vacancy registers and all those, like how they are getting implemented, uh, and if the organizations are not complying with those requirements, how many times have we seen organizations getting penalized, and what is the level of the penalty amount as well. So effective enforcement means that there will be the inspector come facilitator. What they are using is, instead of using a terminology called inspector, they're using a terminology inspector come facilitator, wherein of course that person will be, or that officer would be responsible for the compliance. But anyways, down the line, if the establishment faces any query, anything for which they require any consulting, they would be free to approach this inspector come facilitator, and the inspector will be duty bound to provide clarity on any compliance steps, any return filing, and so on and so forth. So this will all lead to a very ease in implementation process. Of course, this is all I would say, Janth, put in the legislation, put in the paper. How exactly it will be executed, what will be the practicalities around it, is something which we will have to wait and see. Because implementation, the idea is on the paper, the ideation has been put, the law has been received the presidential assent, but how exactly it will be implemented, how the central level and the state level authorities will be coordinating with each other, how the respective filings will be happening, is something that we will have to wait and watch.
But Anurag, we were talking about, we were doing one webinar on food safety.
Yeah.
There, and when I talk about labor codes now, one very important thing what I've seen, government is talking about being a facilitator. Government is
Hmm.
talking about educating the industry on the compliance. And this is a
Hmm.
very welcome change. I have always been, when I was spoken to people outside India, in many countries, specifically I take example of Australia, the regulators is not only doing the fines as we do in India. It's whenever inspector walks in, we know we have to pay something.
Hmm.
That's a mindset. Inspector aa gaya, so we
Absolutely.
have to pay. We have to pay something, right? So there, the mindset is that okay, you've done some mistake, don't do it again. This is how
Hmm.
you have to, this is the way you can improve it. But
Hmm.
I think that's a very welcome change, and I think if this gets implemented in the spirit,
Yeah.
we you we
No, no,
should.
absolutely, absolutely, Jen. Because this concept of inspector come facilitate, as you rightly highlighted, the government has also done a bit of, I would say, homework, wherein they have gone through the global practices. Because I remember in Singapore, they have this concept. If you even go and have a look at the Ministry of the Manpower website, it is so clearly laid down, wherein even a layman can go and understand the law in a very, 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 very normal way. There's no not much amount of technical jargons and all those things. And they have a dedicated help desk where an organization can post their queries, they can get response to them. So right now what happens in the case of the existing labor laws, you might be wary to approach them because you don't know what will be their reaction. How will they respond to you? Because if you say, okay, I haven't done compliance, they will say, okay, fine, be ready for the notice. Okay, so that's why there is not, I would say, a lack of trust between the enforcer as well as the organization. Normally, organization would say, okay, fine, if there is some regularization that we need to do, okay, let's approach a consultant, they will guide us, they will help us. But I think what the government is trying to do with this, with these labor codes is, you don't have to go to a consultant. Rather, you just approach your area enforcement officer, tell them what is the problem that you're facing. In case you are not able to comply with certain things, you can feel free to approach them and see what are the guidance that is being provided by them. I think at the government level as well, there's a lot of sensitization that they have to do with their jurisdictional officer, letting them know how they should be treating the companies and their officers who are approaching them. So there's a lot of education and training that would also come into picture once we have these legislation put into effect. Yeah. So we have got good number of slides to cover. So these are all the laws which are going to be subsumed. And I saw somebody raise this question that whether all these legislations have now been repealed. The answer is no. Though all these four labor codes have received the presidential assent, the date of notification of each of these labor codes is yet to come into effect. And I know many of you would be asking, then why is there is a delay? Uh, all these were passed in 2019, 2020. What is happening? See, we'll have to understand that the labor laws are a concurrent topic under the constitution. So both the center and the states have to basically legislate the law as well as the respective rules. This is a central framework. Now, onus is on the states to basically draft their rules and then get it notified and so on and so forth. The government has given you the framework. The states will decide that, of course, based on their demographics, based on their kind of industrial clusters that they are having, they might say, okay, fine, we might like to tweak certain rules which would be more apt for our own state. Okay, so the state of Maharashtra, the state of Tamil Nadu, which are more, you can say, are industrial states, would be tuning these central rules based on their own nuances, based on their own demographics of their worker population. Now, 2020 was when all these four labor codes somewhat came into picture. Of course, the first was the code on wages, which came into picture on 2019, and then the three codes followed. But at the same time, the onus was on the state to come out with those rules. There has been a considerable back and forth between the center and the state governments in terms of drafting this. But I think right now at this juncture, a majority of the states have came out with their rules. But there are few states who are lacking. I would say that number is quite nominal. I think 3, 4 states are already there. We would be covering those in the next slides. But once all of these states have came out with their set of rules, then I think it's just a matter of time before the government will be rolling this out. Of course, we will also have to take this with a pinch of salt, because I think I remember seeing one of those articles in a media wherein there was a thought process of the government that they may roll it out in a staggered manner, just like what they did in Companies Act, wherein few of the sections were implemented and then so and so forth. So we'll have to wait and watch and see whether the government is going to be following a staggered kind of approach, or it will be all these legislations will be put into effect in one go. But to answer question in short, all these legislation are still there. The establishment have to still comply with these legislations till the time these four labor codes are not put into effect. So these are the timelines, or I would say a kind of a journey of all these four labor codes. To put it in summary, as I was telling earlier, all the four codes, central rules have been put into legislation, aspects wherein presidential assent has been repealed. But the only thing is that there will be a date of notification or date of the official date when these codes will be coming into picture would be something that we'll have to wait and watch. Okay, as I was telling you earlier, so if you look at this, and this is one slide basically captures everything where we are in terms of all these 4 labor codes, how many states have rolled out their draft rules, how many states are remaining. So we have Delhi. I think Delhi will be soon rolling out their draft rules. West Bengal is there, Lakshadweep, Nagaland, and so on and so forth. But if you look at, I think Tamil Nadu is a little behind on the code on social security. So we'll have to see in the coming months, because the central government has already told all the states to basically do this at the earliest. I think the last deadline which was given was 31st March 2025. So we'll have to see whether those timelines have been extended, what is their sort of internal deliberations which are happening. But major states have already rolled out their draft rules. So some of the states have rolled out their draft rules, are expecting the public to provide their feedback as well. So we'll have to see when this will be getting notified. Now,
I've also sorry. So I've also shared a link to our one of the articles on white paper on our portal, where you can get real-time status of this, of the labor codes, and you can also download the rules which are notified by the different states. It's in
yeah.
the chat box.
So I'm because this is one topic on wages, which I would say would be of interest to both the establishments as well as an employee. And that's why I brought this slide forward. I could have uh, uh, gone into the theoretical part, but this is one practical area wherein we all need to pay much more attention as to how it will be impacting. See, as I was telling you earlier, and I think, Jayant, you would also like to showcase something that how the wages has been, same terminology but different interpretation, or rather I would say same terminology, different definition leading to different interpretation. So that is what is happening. So if you would like to share what was your analysis and how your platform was able to bring out some interesting statistics, it would be great before we jump onto this definition part.
Because see, this one question came repeatedly, and in fact, when we were not just came from the industry, it came from, we were sitting with one of the very important government authority who had a lot of real role to play in different in drafting rules, and they have been given responsibility of looking at what how many, if some laws can be reduced or compliance burdens can be reduced. So one biggest challenge came, what is it, what is in definition? This question came. So we thought, okay, let's build something where we can actually show what is the challenge in wages in the definition. I'm not talking about only wages, I'm talking about definitions really, which this labor codes are trying to simplify. We have built this software, okay, wherein we try to look at the definitions used in the laws. Okay, look at this, the word definite wages. It's been used 357 times in different laws in India, and you could see been used differently. Okay, then don't read the entire text, just read the wording itself. Okay, look at the quantum of data. Every regulator has a different definition. Now, if I have to look at word, I'm looking at exact word wages. Now, if I have to instead of exact word, I want to look at definitions which contains the word wages in India. Okay, there are 529 times this word wages have been used in different laws across India, and you have to deal with everything. Okay, every regulator, every different body is using it differently. The word basic wages is different, the word wages. And not just this, I'm saying the word, let's say, employees is one of my favorite definitions. I'm saying we say employee is an employee. In India itself, how many times this word has been used? More than 263 times this word has been used, employee, in different definition. And there are many such definitions which gets used. Just to throw numbers, in India itself, there are more than 92,000 definitions across different laws. Now, this is the complexity and which these labor codes are trying to simplify.
Yeah, thanks, Jayant. And that was a pretty useful insight and mind-boggling numbers, and makes us understand the depth of this entire situation. Uh, because because this is what leads to interpretation issues and then litigations and all those things. Because again, for every legislation, the authorities might be having a different interpretation of the view based on the legislation, and it becomes difficult even for us as a consultant to whenever we do the compliance, and whenever we do the payroll and all those things, it becomes a very difficult exercise to do the comp structuring and to ensure that when we process the payroll, the amount of contributions which are going towards PF, gratuity, ESI, all those things, how we interpret them, and then how we basically do the necessary compliance around it. So, so think of a scenario, and particularly in case of a manufacturing company, it becomes all the more very difficult exercise to do those interpretation and to do the ensuing compliances around it. But let's look at this.
Anurag, I'm just interrupting in between, but I trust me,
Mhm.
this problem is not for the industry only. This problem is for the government also. So
Yeah,
as I was
yeah,
sitting with this one of this, yeah, as I mentioned in the department, they themselves didn't know how many times this word has been used. They themselves don't know how
absolutely.
many compliances are there in each law.
Yeah,
When
yeah.
I talk about Factories Act, trust me,
Mm,
Factories Act in different state has different number of compliance. Shop and establishment,
absolutely.
while shop and establishment has no relation with labor codes, I'm saying, but shop and establishment, different state have different kind of a compliance. That's the kind of a
Yeah.
complexity. If I have to work in 10 states in India, I've opened up branches in 10 states. I forget, I'm a retail company. Trust me, it's not an easy job. I have to understand
Mhm.
compliance in every state. So you need to have expertise there as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say this is a difficulty for both the legislator, or I would rather say the field officer level, as well as the establishment, as well as the consultant like us who have to do the compliance. So this is what I think will be one of the biggest achievement if and when the labor codes come into picture, is the uniformity of the definition, the ease of interpretation, and the ease of compliance around it. But again we have to take it with a pinch of salt, because how the wages have been defined in the labor codes is a interesting concept in itself. Because what they have tried to do here is they have widened the definition of wages, and because of this definition coming into picture, how it will be impacting the organizations in terms of their provident fund payments, gratuity, leave encashment, overtime, everything will be having a domino effect around it. So let's quickly have a look at this definition. So what how it has been defined? It is a half page definition in the legislation, which says there are four buckets, and we have simplified it. Of course, when you read it as per the legislation, it becomes a much more mind-boggling thing. But we have tried to simplify it and put this into four buckets, wherein we are saying every remuneration. They have not used the concept of CTC. Rather, what they are saying is all remuneration, whether by way of salary, allowances, or otherwise, expressed in money or capable of being so expressed in terms of the employment expressed or employed, where fulfilled, be payable to a person. So anything that you're paying to an employee will be first covered in the first bucket. And this includes your basic pay, DNS allowance, and retaining allowance. Okay. Even if you are providing, perquisite facilities like ESOPs, like a company leased accommodation, like company provided car, everything will be in this bucket. Okay. Now we have specified exclusions wherein the law says, okay, fine, these are included portion, but out of this is something that can be treated as excluded. What are those exclusions? Stat bonus. Stat bonus means the bonus which is payable under the Payment of Bonus Act. What about the variable bonus? Variable bonus, if we look at this definition, has not been excluded. Value of housing accommodation is excluded, employer contribution to PF, conveyance allowance, house rent allowance, overtime allowance, the usual suspects, gratuity and your retrenchment compensation, these components are specifically excluded. But now the third part becomes much more interesting, because I think somewhere down the line, the government was aware that the minute we quote exclusions, the organizations, the consultant will try to get innovative, and then they will try to structure their compensation in such a way that the maximum, the maximum amount uh, is allocated to the specified exclusions. And that is where the third bucket comes into picture, wherein they say at any point of time, these exclusions cannot exceed the 50% of your remuneration. So as and where it increases, that delta or the difference will be added back to the definition of the wages. At the same time, wherever any non-monetary perquisites like car lease or ESOPs is being provided, that would also deem to be forming part of that remuneration with the prescribed cap of 15% of the total wages. So this is the how the definition is worded. But again, numbers don't lie. So we will quickly jump on to the next part, wherein we'll talk about how this definition will be interpreted and how numerically it will look like. So let's quickly go through this. I have not put in the bulky numbers, but rather very, very simple numbers. So herein in the first bucket, we have 25,000 rupees, which comprises of basic HRA, medical, commission, and conveyance, adding up to 25,000. Now, using that definition, we plug in those exclusions, which is HRA, commission, conveyance, fine, 13,000. Okay. So as a result of which one would say, okay, fine, 12,000 is something that would be construed as wages. But hang on, that's where things become interesting. Wherein we say, okay, my specified exclusion is 13,000. What is my 50% of my wages? 25,000, 50%, 12,500. So my exclusions are basically exceeding uh, uh, my 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 exclusions are basically exceeding the specified limit of 50%, which is by 500 rupees. So that 500 rupees gets added back and will be treated as wages only. Okay. So in a normal case, had those ring fencing not been done, the wages would have been construed as 12,000 only. But because of this conditional inclusion, now it will be considered as 12,500. Of course, you may say 500 here and there, but think of it from the larger employee standpoint and the uh, the the hierarchy in an organization. So people who are earning, a monthly salary of 1 lakh, 2 lakh, whatever, think of this, how it will be impacting their wages definition and the subsequent compliances around it. Another numerical example, and this is one thing that we have on a time to time basis, we received this query because this is one big ticket item which is going to be impacting the organization, how they will be accounting for it, how the actuarial valuation will be done, how the payout will happen, is something that we would have to consider. Let's jump to the next slide quickly. So in this next slide, what we have done is, again, we have given a breakup of the CTC, or rather I would say remuneration paid to a typical employee having, a CTC of around 24 lakhs. Okay. So if you look at under the existing law, the gratuity payout would be coming to around 3,84,000. But when we plug the definition of wages, and we have to keep in mind the definition of wages would be having a ripple impact. So if you would see the provident fund under the existing law, it would come as 96,000, but this payout for provident fund also increases to 1,72,000. How it can be mitigated, how it can be structured is something that we'll cover in the subsequent slides. But if whatever is the present structure, we go with that flow, we apply the definition of the wages under the code on social security will come to 14,34,000. My formula for gratuity continues to remains the same, which is 15 days salary for every completed year of service. As a result of which, when we plug this definition of wages, my gratuity payout under the labor codes is coming to 6,89,900, 812. So this is a big amount. And think of a scenario where an organization is paying gratuity over and above the CTC, how it will be impacting them. In fact, organizations who are making a part of their CTC only, the payout will be based on the last drawn salary. And the interesting part is there's no grandfathering clause as of now. So let's suppose come 1st April 2026, the code on social security comes into picture. You have employees who after 20 years of service are leaving the organizations. You have to make the gratuity payout because there is no grandfathering clause. The last drawn wages will be wages as per the definition prescribed under the code on social security. Think of the impact it will be having on the organization in terms of the payout, how it will be impacting the financials of the company. So again, this is one big ticket item which will be having an impact. And again, the necessity is to understand the impact it would be having, how to plan accordingly, whether the policies need to be restructured or realigned is something that an organization has to look at. Once we have interpreted the definition of wages, once we understand the impact it will be having on the compensation and benefits, what are those areas that an organization need to look at? As I was telling you earlier, gratuity is one big ticket area. What will be the amount of benefit that an organization has to pay? Whether gratuity has to be a part of CTC, whether it can be above CTC. This is one decision making point. Whether we need to cap the gratuity amount. Currently, as per the Payment of Gratuity Act, the prescribed limit is around 2 million INR, which is 20 lakhs. Whether it can be paid over and above that amount, or there are some organizations who are a bit more benevolent, wherein they don't prescribe the gratuity to that prescribed limit of 20 lakhs, and they pay a better terms of gratuity, how it will be impacting them as an organization. Organizations having the gratuity funded through a trust or an insurance, how it will be impacting them in terms of their insurance premium payout, in terms of their actuarial valuation. Organizations having their trust deed, because some organizations have the approved gratuity fund, which has got the approval from the CIT, whether any changes are required to be maintained in the trust deed, whether those variations are required to be carried out, whether those variations have to be approved by the Commissioner of Income Tax is something that the organizations have to take into consideration. Similarly, for Provident Fund, we know there's a prescribed threshold limit of 15,000, whether the organizations can limit the contributions of the employees to that limit. If yes, whether there is any alternative available in terms of the national pension scheme. PF, can the organization say for employees who are already above the threshold limit, can they limit their PF contribution to their basic salary only instead of going towards the definition of wages? That is another area that one needs to look at. In case of an organization having the internal provident fund, or rather I would say exempted provident fund trust, whether there's a requirement to review the PF trust deeds, make necessary alignments, carry out those variations and get those variations approved by both the RPFC or stroke EPFO as well as the CIT. What will be the policy for the international workers? Because again, the international workers, no prescribed threshold limit is required. They are required to make a mandatory contribution based on the definition of the wages, whether how it will be impacting the international workers. Most of these international workers are tax equalized as well as social security equalized. How it will be impacting the organization's tax equalization policy is something that one need to consider. In terms of the overtime as well, because the overtime is governed now under the existing legislation by the Payment of the Wages Act and so on and so forth. Because the Payment of Wages Act will not be having any prescribed limit, whether it will be impacting the white collar employees as well as not, whether the organizations will be required to pay overtime for such white collar category or not is something that one needs to consider. Again, because the overtime will be paid at twice the rate of wages and my wages definition is going to widen, then how it will be impacting your payout of the overtime. So all these changes will require a considerable rethink of the compensation structure. Right now, whenever we do the compensation structuring for the organizations, we focus primarily on the tax aspect and then we move towards the labor codes and the social security aspect. But now with the tax more or less getting settled, we know now the new regime will advocate for the flat structure with your HRA and all similar allowances, losing out on those benefits and the new regime becoming much more viable. The compensation structure will be more towards these labor codes, how to structure your salary so that everything is aligned as per the respective legislation, but at the same time, it doesn't lead to additional cash outflow for the establishments. At the same time, the employee doesn't also suffer because of the reduced take home pay. Of course their retirement benefits might be increasing because of these definition of wages, but then their take home pay would also get impacted. So how to basically align that structure is the biggest thing that the organizations will have to look at. So continuing with this compensation and benefit policy part, again, these are some of the areas that an organization have to look at in terms of the entire policy and process, how to determine the wages in an ongoing manner. So let's suppose if an organization doesn't want to do anything with their structure, what will their wages look like? What will be the coverage of the ESI, stat bonus? In case they have a lower threshold category of blue collared category of employees, minimum wages compliance, documentation for all these new components if they bring into their structure new components as well. employment contracts, formats of the pay slips, employee register. All these are key areas that an organization needs to look at. So jumping from the
Sorry, Anurag,
yeah,
once again. So, Akshit, can you go back to previous slide? So, we spoke about changing in employee contracts also. So, does it mean the organization are supposed to make some amendments in the existing employee contracts also, or it will be applicable, and they should do it for the future employees only?
absolutely, absolutely. Because one of the changes uh, would be in terms of the appointment letter, because, and I would be covering in my subsequent slides, but just because you have raised this question, I wanted to answer it, that there's a prescribed format of the employment contract, and the employment contract is required to have certain specified fields, like Aadhaar number, UN number, labor identification number, and so on and so forth. So once the codes come into picture or put into effect, the organizations will be required to ensure that whatever employment contracts are being issued by them, they need to have those specific mandatory fields in there. Plus, at the same time, for even existing set of employees, they will be given up, transition time. I think it is around 3 months or 90 days, within which the organizations will be required to reissue the employment contract, which contains all these fields. Okay, so I would say employment contract in terms of the basic structure or the construct of those employment contract, in terms of ensuring how they would be depicting the salary breakup, all these have to undergo change. But starting point will be the compensation structuring exercise, understanding, and then bringing out or rolling out the new structure, and then accordingly aligning your employment contracts in with those structures. At the same time, there are other areas which would also get impacted. So how to align your existing set of policies and procedure is also something that one would need to look at. So I want to focus on this part as well, because as I was telling you earlier, the world as well as likewise India has gone a good amount of change in the last 2 to 3 decades. And in a traditional sense, what we always used to think was person working for an organization will be considered as an employee, or you can work for a contractor, and then the principal employer engages you, work there, and then there would be those compliances around it. Now, in the past 2 to 3 decades, of course, with the technology coming to picture, the business models have changed, as a result of which the way the organizations engage with the workmen is something that has also changed. And as a result of which, you would see uh, the categorization of even the basic construct of employment. See, the basic construct is always a master servant relationship. But then uh, organization have started stepping out of this particular construct and engaging employers on a different footing. And that's why you will see gig workers, platform workers, unorganized workers, fixed term employment coming into picture. And there are specific definitions which have been prescribed in the labor codes. And at the same time, for each category of these workers, there would be a specific legislation, or I would say specific fund created for them for the benefit of this employees. We need to understand provident fund is something that is provided to an employee. What about gig workers? And let's first understand what exactly is a gig worker. These are people who are not in the basic construct of the employer relationship, but at the same time are working for an organization. They may be using a platform via which they could get engaged, in which case they would classify as a platform worker. Gig worker would be essentially your typical independent consultants. But at the same time, what I'm seeing, and interestingly, I think day before yesterday, the Karnataka ordinance for the gig workers also came into picture. Again, it will be put into effect once it is notified. But I was having a look at the definition of the gig worker, and their interpretation or their mention of the gig workers is a tad bit different as compared to what has been quoted in the labor codes, wherein they are saying that the gig worker and the platform workers are synonymous. Whereas in the case of the labor codes, it is a tad bit different. In the case of a labor codes, the platform worker means typically your, delivery force working in Uber, Swiggy, Zomato. They will be considered as a platform worker because they are providing assistance through a technology platform. Whereas a gig worker is someone who is not a employer-employee relationship, not working within that circle, but falling outside of it and working more like in a independent capacity. I would say a consultant would be coming under the gig worker category. Unorganized workers are your home-based workers, your migrant workers. This will be falling under unorganized workers. Fixed term employment means any person who is being engaged for a fixed term employment, and therein your even expat employees, foreign nationals coming into India working for a defined period of time, they might be, or other, I would say they would be considered under the fixed term employment. So there will be a separate, um, or either I would say equivalent benefits on a proportionate basis carved out for such category of employees as well. So these are the four categories, and one need to be cognizant of within an organization whenever they are engaging their personnel under each category, what will be their compliance requirements and how to adhere to that. We have seen, definitions like aggregators also come into picture, where, and Zomato, Swiggy, and all those things will be considered as aggregators, and what will be their roles and responsibilities in terms of contribution, and what will be the percentage prescribed. This is something that the government is working on, and we have already seen that they have created a portal wherein gig workers gig workers are required to get themselves registered, get their number, and then there is a central database which is being created by the government for these category of employees, so that once the government has got the relevant data structure in place, then they will start rolling out the benefits for these guys. We also know that there is a Pradhan Mantri Arogya Yojana was there, which provided insurance benefit to these category of employees, or rather, I would say gig workers as well. So all these things will be rolled out for these category of worker population.
I know, is it also, do you also foresee any kind of an impact in a principal employer relationship? So, specifically when it comes to banks, because you see banks, financial institutions, they have a lot of employees which are off role, which would typically work in the roles of the DSAs or the service providers, which are dedicatedly working for the institution for the principal employer, but not on their roles.
Yeah.
Will it also have any kind of an impact on those kind of workers?
I would say not much, because already if you look at major labor legislation, like PF, ESI, already they have factored these category of employees already. The reason for that is principal employer is defined, and there's a good amount of onus which has been cast on the principal employer. What the law says is, in case there's a lack of compliance, the authorities will first catch the principal employer. From the principal employer side, what they are required to do is ensure that wherever they are engaging the contracted employees, they are being provided, I would say they are treated more or less at par with their present segment of employees. And so the benefits like Provident Fund, ESI, everything, all those benefits are being covered for them. And how do typically principal employer ensure these kind of compliances is, whenever they enter into an agreement for engaging contract employees, there is a very detailed agreement which is entered into with the contractor, wherein they say that the contractor will be responsible for ensuring all the social security and labor compliances, and once those compliances have taken place, then the contractor will be furnishing those returns to the concerned principal employer. So organization usually have a kind of a due diligence process and internal audit process in place to ensure that such compliances are taking picture, because ultimately the onus is on the principal employer at the end of the day. In case non-compliance happens, then the authorities will come and get hold of the principal employer establishment. Yeah. So to answer your question, it will be having an impact, but not that much as it would happen in case of the other category of workers like gig worker, platform workers, because contractual employees have more or less been covered in the existing legislations as well. Yeah. So yeah, let's quickly jump on to the different labor codes and how it has changed vis-a-vis the existing legislation. So quickly running on the codes on wages, which covers like minimum wages and payment of wages act. So right now under the existing legislation, the minimum wages is applicable only to scheduled employment, whereas under the Code of Wages, all employees for whom the minimum rate of wages has been prescribed would be getting covered. So there will be a wider definition of minimum wages or the employment category coming into picture. Then there would be minimum wage limits, more than 1,000 minimum wages prescribed based on the nature of employments. But now there will be a wider category of employees based on their skill category, like unskilled, semi-skilled, highly skilled, who would be getting covered. At the same time, minimum wages will be prescribed on the geography location wherein the employees are rendering services. So somebody who is rendering services in coal mines, in some backward regions, there will be a separate category of minimum wages which will be prescribed. Again, it would also depend upon the kind of work being done by such employees. Now, there's a unique concept of national floor wages, which will be coming out in labor codes. National floor wage is something that will be prescribed by the central governments, and that the states will, at any point of time, have to ensure that the minimum wages so prescribed is never below the national floor wages limit. It can be equal or more than the national floor wages limit. Similarly, the payment of wages right now, it is applicable for anybody who is having wages not exceeding 24,000. They have removed this limit, and as a result of it, that's why I was saying that whether the overtime wages will be applicable on a white collar employees or not is something that we'll have to wait and see. Uh, Start bonus 21,000 is the limit. It is believed, and likewise for other category of compliances, that there might be some rationalization around these limits. It may be increased or aligned with the other legislations as well. Wages for calculation of minimum bonus is 7,000 per month. Again, it is expected that it will be rationalized, keeping in view with the current times. Definition of wages is something that we have already covered. There, right now, there is a very narrow definition of employer. So the contractor definition is something that will be covered in the definition of the employer. So there will be a greater category of owners cast on the contractor as well. So to answer your question, Jayant, as I was saying earlier, though the onus has been cast on the principal employer, but now the more onus will be cast on the contractor as well. Okay. The I think code on wages part. Now we cover the code on social security. So in terms of the code on social security, so right now the code on social security was more or less focused on the organized sector. But as I was telling you earlier, that the focus will be also on unorganized workers, gig workers, platform and home-based workers. So there will be some additional category of workers which will be included in the code on social security. And I think the concept behind this is the government wants to make social security a very, very universal concept. I'll just give you a brief sort of like, in I don't know how many of you are aware that India has already entered into social security agreements with around 18 countries. And this is more to do with the international workers compliance. But amazingly, US and UK haven't yet come on board. And the reason, one of the primary reason quoted by them was that India doesn't have a universal social security scheme. So why should they be uh, having those discussions around entering into social security agreements? And this is where I think the government wants to bring that concept of universality and say that, okay, irrespective of the kind of work that you are doing, you will be covered under the social security umbrella. And we'll also have to consider this from a, I would say, macro perspective, because right now, India average population is pretty young as compared to what we are seeing in other developed countries like Japan, US, UK, and so on and so forth. But over a period of time, we will see the average population age bracket increasing. And as the average age population bracket starts increasing, there will be a greater requirement for government to have those social security structure in place. And so it is a right time for the government to start thinking about the population who will be shifting from this category to a age category wherein they would be requiring a greater amount of social security support, keeping in view the inflationary trends, keeping in view the fact that the medical facilities, everything is getting costlier. So I think deep down, I think government is aware that this is one area that will have to be adequately addressed. And the moment is right now, because right now we have a demographics advantage wherein we have a good amount of young population who can contribute towards the social security scheme, which will help in providing those benefits to the older population. So that was, I think, one of the areas, and that's why what we are seeing in Code on Social Security, there's a wider category of segment of population that will be covered. Now, in terms of the applicability of provisions of Provident Fund, again, if you are above the 15,000 threshold limit, you can exclude yourself from PF pension and ED life. But in the case of Code on Social Security, though one can exclude themselves from pension and EDLI, which is Employee Deposit Linked Insurance Scheme, but Provident Fund is something that would be applicable in such a case. Similarly, for ESI, right now the threshold limit is 21,000 per month. Uh, as I was telling you earlier, all these threshold limit is expected to be rationalized. It might so happen that there will be a single threshold limit will be applicable for Provident Fund, ESI, stat bonus and all those things. So again, this will the perspective here is to have those ease of compliance structure in place so that there's a single threshold limit, and once you cross that threshold limit, either the legislation would be applicable or not applicable depending upon those limits which are prescribed. Gratuity, right now it is applicable only for regular employees, but in Code on Social Security, any fixed term employees who has provided a service of 1 year or more will be entitled to a gratuity, and this will be having impact on the expat population as well. Right now, the expatriate employees typically don't render a service period of 5 years or more, and hence are not entitled to gratuity. So, in case you have expat populations who are coming for a period of 2 years, 3 years, then also the organization has to provide for those payment of gratuity. Of course, the gratuity will be paid on a proportionate basis. Wage definition is uniform, so I'm not going to cover those aspects. Yeah.
Yeah, so Anurag, I think one additional change which is happening in the world right now is a volatility in different industries. I think if I talk about at least a generation earlier than us, they could work in one company for their entire career and could retire
Yeah.
from there. Today, I think
Yeah.
in our generation, and I say our generation is I'm 45, so my generation is slightly still we could come and work in lesser number of companies. Now
Hmm.
the generation next coming up, it's not the challenge only they would work in more number of companies, but also they would end up working in multiple industries also, multiple domains also. Why? Because of the volatility in the industry. I think the faster technology and business models are evolving, it's not guaranteed today that you start in an industry and you'll end up in the same industry, or you start in one domain, you'll end up in the same domain. So I
Hmm.
think this creates a lot of vulnerability also in terms of the employment and the employ uh, conditions and
Hmm.
the employment as such. So in such scenario, if what we are seeing in the developing economy, especially if I talk about US, layoffs is the a way of life. Layoffs happens, and it's okay. Everybody's used to. In India, we are not used to, but it may happen. We may also get hit. So we have to at least give a buffer. Unlike in US, we do not have unemployment benefits. We get 2,000 rupees an unemployment benefit that cannot meet requirement of somebody who's living in a Gurgaon or a Bangalore kind of a cities. These social security conditions should give at least a basic cover for somebody to manage for the period you do not have an alternate employment. I think this also is very important in the volatile times which we are entering in right now.
Absolutely, absolutely. So there are two facets to it, Jayat, and that I'm glad you asked this question because we have to consider it from both the aspects. See, right now, what happens is, in case there's organizations who want to retrench their employees, right now the laws are very strict. So anybody who is having I think the threshold limit is 100 employees. So if you are having 100 employees or more than 100 employees, in case tomorrow down the line you want to retrench them, then you will have to approach the labor board, seek their concurrence, and then only you can do that. Okay. What the labor code intends to do is they want to rationalize it and they want to increase this limit from 100 to 300.
Mm.
So minute your threshold limit becomes 300, any organizations, I would say mid-level organization or SME kind of organization, uh, it would be easier for them to retrench employees. And I think the organization or rather government's approach behind this was to not let, and we have seen those liquidation, bankruptcies happening in this sector, wherein because you're not able to retrench employees, the companies go belly up, right? So I think government thought process is we want you to work, we want you to earn profit, and in case you're not able to sustain your existing labor force, you should be free to let them go. I think that was their thought process. But again, every sides have got, two coin. Every coin has got two sides to it. So if you look at it other way around, the trade unions are saying, no, no, this is not good for us. That means any organizations having 300 or less than 300, they will be letting go of their employees. So there's again a lack of trust between the labor union and the establishments, wherein labor unions don't understand the scenario that if then organization is not earning profit, how they can sustain in a longer run. Because ultimately, it's not a benevolent organization. We have to earn profits at the end of the day. So again, it's like two facets to every approach. But interestingly, what I think the government has done is they have bought this concept of a reskilling fund as well to answer your question. So fixed term employment, as we are looking at this slide, fixed term employment, I think we have already dwelled on it. I'm not going to explain it in detail now. Reskilling fund under the existing labor legislation is not this concept is not there. So they have introduced this concept that wherever you retrench an employee within 10 days, an amount equal to 15 days wages has to be contributed by the organization towards a fund called as a reskilling fund. So this money will go to the government, and then the government will be releasing funds to the respective worker employee within 45 days of retrenchment. So they will be receiving this money. And of course, it all ties back because with all those direct beneficiary scheme in place, Aadhaar structuring, and all those things, it will become easier for the government to give benefits to such category of employees who are retrenched. So I think government is trying to appease both the segments, wherein they say, okay, we are saying organization, you can retrench employees, but at the same time, when you retrench, you will have to also contribute towards the reskilling fund as well. So I would say it's a balanced approach, but again, we have to see it from the labor union side, we have to see it from the organization side, we have to see it from the employee side, and obviously, for any view taken, we cannot have happy customers in all the scenarios. Okay, so coming to the third pass, application for registration trade union. So this will be a there will be a electronic mode by which trade unions can get themselves registered. And I think minimum requirement was 7 or more members. So I think they have kept the same limits only. I think somebody asked this question, will it be applicable to IT industry? Yes, of course, it will be applicable to IT industry as well. Some of the legislation, of course, the Factories Act normally doesn't apply. And we have to keep this facet in mind as well, that the Shops and Establishment Act, POSH, has not been covered under the labor law. So in case you're not getting covered under the Factories Act, then the Shops and Establishment Act will be applied regarding leave days and all those things. Whatever facets are covered in the shops and establishment, one will need to comply with those requirements as well. So let's look at occupational health and conditions, because that is where it becomes a bit more interesting. And as I was telling you earlier, appointment letter concept has been bought, wherein there are certain mandatory fields which would need to be mentioned in the appointment letter, and there would be a transition phase for the existing employees. Extra wages for overtime, we have covered on this aspect. Entitlement for annual leave with wages. Now, this is where the government is trying to bring a kind of a work-life balance, wherein anybody who's worked for 240 days under the present law will be entitled for annual leave, wherein they have brought about anybody who's worked for 180 days will be entitled to annual leave. Leave encashment concept has been also been brought about, and they have bought a concept of a leave encashment, whereas in the existing Factories Act and all those things, they don't have a concept of leave encashment, but we have seen those concepts in respective some of the states labor law legislation, or rather I would say shops and establishment legislation. They have covered this concept of leave encashment, whereas in this particular, what they are saying is that the maximum leaves which can be carried forward is 30 days. And wherever you have some accumulated leaves, you can be entitled to a leave encashment. So organizations have to be cognizant of those things and how those actuarial valuation have to be done, and those liabilities have to be accrued, how it will be impacting your financials and reflected in your disclosure statements is something that you need to be cognizant about. So all in all, once we have had a good knowledge on the labor codes, of course, in this limited session, we have barely scratched the surface, but we have to be aware about with the labor codes coming into picture, what is the business impact? First and foremost, as I was telling you earlier, salary structure alignment is something that is the first and foremost requirement. How the labor codes will be impacting your P&L in items like gratuity, PF overtime, leave encashment is something that one needs to consider. How it will be impacting the compliances, because obviously one needs to be aware about whether there will be any changes in the compliance or not, and we have to be aware about this, that the penalty guidelines under the labor codes have also been very harsh. Of course, there will be compounding features as well, wherein you can approach and without any litigation you can compound certain offenses as well. Again, a concept picked up from income tax and the FEMA regime. But at the same time, in case there is a non-compliance, then organizations will have to pay hefty penalties. So ease of compliance, but in case of non-compliance, hefty penalties is something that you will have to take into consideration. So there's a kind of a, you can say, carrot and stick approach which has been followed by the government. Workforce categorization we have covered, but organizations will have to categorize their workforce, understand which of them qualified as international workers, normal category of workers, fixed term employees, gig workers, unorganized workers. All these categorization will help the organization in ensuring the compliance for them. Alignment of the HR policy, your leave policy, overtime policy, compensation policies, your diversity, equal remuneration policies, everything will have to be aligned with the new legislation. And that will also require review of your existing payroll and process, because I remember in one of the segment they have mentioned that in case a person leaves the organization, the organization is expected to do the full and final settlements within a period of 2 days, which is very impracticable in terms of how can an organization do a full and final settlement in 2 days period. So on these particular, there are certain aspects on which the relevant trade forums like NASSCOM, SOCHM have given representation to the government, asking them to make those changes which are much more practical rather than put onerous task on the organization to comply with certain requirements. Working hours, leave policy and rest days, again, goes with the alignment of the HR policies. Letter of appointment, we have covered. Contractor related compliance is something that one needs to look at. So what actions are required from an organization? And we'll have to see that this is not something that is an area of HR. Rather, I would say this is one legislation which will be requiring different stakeholders, be it HR, finance, IT, legal. Everybody will have to bury their heads and basically do a bit of brainstorming as to how this entire alignment has to be done. So analysis of the impact, understanding the codes, review of the policies and procedures, and last but not the least, communicating to the employees of how these changes will be impacting them, their payouts, their benefits is something that an organization has to do.
Yeah, Anurag, you touched upon the last slide, about compliance burden getting reduced, but the penalties getting increasing. I want to
Yeah.
draw an analogy to the GST laws. Uh, Before GST regime, there were 17 laws, tax laws. There were so many tax laws, and trust me, it was so complicated. Nobody knew where and who is doing correct filing of all the taxes. In what
Mhm.
item, what laws are applicable? There were huge confusion around it. So
Yeah.
enforcement was also a big challenge, because sometimes interpretation was not even clear to the regulators, to the inspectors also. So there were a
Mhm.
lot of enforcement was a challenge because it was too bulky. But when the
Yeah.
GST came in, obviously it took a little bit of time for settling it down. But today the
Mhm.
enforcement in GST regulations are far more higher than what it was in earlier days. You could evade
Yeah.
taxes at that point of time. Today in GST you can't. Everything,
Yeah.
if not, if not immediately, it can get tracked. And want to get noticed even if you are done, taken a wrong input credit somewhere. Same you can expect in the labor codes also, because one, it will get simplified. Moment it gets simplified, the enforcement gets easier. Not just the employer, the regulator, and the employees also would be much more aware of these regulations than ever
Mm.
before. Uh, Digitization is happening at a very vast pace. You can expect any non-compliance will have some records, some traces somewhere. You got evaded. Like today, there are a lot of things. I won't say today is as bad as it was earlier, but
Mm.
again, when there is not digitization, you're not leaving any traces. You need to do a forensic to be able to find out some non-compliance at times, but it'll become much more easier. So I think knowing it, um, uh, and putting the right kind of a process is very important. And this change, one has to be, one has to ensure, get used to it, because it's not going to work on I know it all. It's not going to work on that attitude. Okay, I've been doing it for years, so I know how to how to tackle it. It's
Yeah.
the things, the game, the rules are going to change.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, you are absolutely right, because the minute things are getting easier, yeah, and the technology comes into picture, there will be a lot of level of transparency. At the same time, the organization's owners to do the necessary compliance also becomes, imperative. Because, and that's why I think the thought process of the government is, we'll make it easy for you, but if you don't do it, then we're going to punish you hard. So there will be harder penalties, there will be harder level of prosecution and all those things. And the onus will be on organization to ensure that the compliances are taking place. So it's a I would say it's a balanced approach, because, and it's fair as well, because that is what is happening in other countries as well. Because if we take an example of running a car and having those traffic challans, the minute we know that, okay, if we don't comply, the challan is going to come into our portal or in our email box, and we will be required to pay it. So the minute you do that, you will be very cognizant and drive your vehicle in a right speed and comply with whatever is the requirement. So I would say it's a good approach. Um, I'm just having a look at the kind of questions, and one interesting question was, what's the difference between worker and employee? And I would just like to quickly answer this, because uh, it's a good question in a sense that, um, even today there's a different definition of employee and there's a different definition of workman. So likewise in the labor codes as well, they have carried it forward. And I think what government is mentioning, or what the legislative intent is, that workers are anybody who is not in a managerial or a supervisory or a administrative capacity. Anybody who is above the ages of 18,000 or 15,000, depending upon the kind of legislation that they have put in the labor codes, will be considered as workmen. So for the government is trying to distinguish between white collar and blue collar. Typically, a blue collar who is not in a supervisory, managerial, or administrative capacity will be having a separate set of benefits. Rather, I would say a broader level of benefits vis-a-vis a person who qualifies as a white collar employee. So that is the key difference I would say is between worker and employee. Are these the terminology used for employee? I'm sorry, I didn't get this question. So if somebody can repeat it, that would be great, or clarified. What about already certified standing orders? See, anywhere where the organization or the changes in the legislation comes into picture, there's a transitionary mechanism. I haven't touched about the aspect that Provident Fund have got three schemes: Provident Fund scheme, pension scheme, idealized scheme. Law has specifically mentioned that all schemes, once the code comes into picture, will remain as is for a period of 12 months till the time the new scheme is coming into picture. Similarly, for registration as well, wherever you have taken that certified standing order, I believe that the same would be standing good only till the time it is revoked by the government, and there might be some transitionary mechanism that will be put by government. So I think that hopefully should answer your question. Yeah. So I think we have covered all the slides. How we are supporting our clients. I think we have covered in this slide phase one, phase two, phase three. I mean, This is something that is a sort of like takeaway that we do provide, and we have been assisting clients in doing that impact study and realignment of their policies and procedures. So I think few years back, I would say in 2021, there was a lot of assignments that we did with our organizations, wherein we helped them, and still we are receiving queries wherein clients are interested in knowing that is it the right time to comply with the labor codes or wait and what approach. I would say that some of these are good practices. The practices like issuing your appointment letter in that structured format. These are something that one need not wait for the labor codes to come into effect. This is something that you can do it right now. And so when we do this impact study, we normally advise the clients that what is this something that can be done now. It's a good practice. Let's not even wait for the government to roll it out, and what is the areas on which clarity is needed, some relevant circular notification is required. So we highlight those areas whenever we do such kind of impact study.
Uh, Before we just go back, see, I also want to add one thing. Specifically the HR for the HR functions. See, this is going to be a major change because it's going to impact every function. You from your appointment letters to your compensation and benefits, and the way the kind of policies which you have to devise. I think every function, even if it's a very large organization, you say business HR, you would say training and development, you would say comp and ben, you would say hiring teams, all the functions of HR are going to get impacted. And you
Yeah.
know what very important aspect is this change is happening at the time when there are other changes which are happening in different other laws as well. Like your
Absolutely.
DPDP. DPDP is just around the corner. Okay.
Yeah.
HR folks typically have not been much focused on. I'm not saying you're not aware of that, but that's not a focus area. The data protection, personal data protection has not been a focus area for us in India specifically,
Yeah.
but it's going to
Mm.
impact you. You
Mm.
you have to deal with multiple changes happening at the same time. So
Mm.
one has to be really cognizant that how you are preparing yourself and how you are bringing everybody together. Who
Yeah.
is going to be responsible for these laws? Today there are 17 laws, and you can say responsibility of one person, another person. When the number of laws reduces, who is going to own it? Defining that ownership, ensuring those compliance. I think there are a lot of restructuring. As and I use the word change management. I think this change
Mm.
management is going to become very imperative because
Mm.
understanding the impact while there are other moving parts and defining the ownership and also reviewing it on a periodic basis. It's not going to be just your auditor coming in and doing those small audits. It's going to be a lot more in house also, because again, as I said, compliance has become simplified. The enforcement will become more tougher. So you cannot wait for the end of the year for an auditor to come, then find out what changed, what was missed. You have to be on top of it at all the time.
Mm.
You need to plan it well. You need to start
Yeah.
sensitizing it right now. And as we are talking to a lot of people, HR is still aware of it, but other functions, they think it's not my cup of tea.
Mm.
Let HR manage it. Start sensitizing it right now. Otherwise, the moment the codes are notified, the rules are notified, and you have start implementation start happening, you may not have time and enough time in hands to uh, prepare the entire organization.
Absolutely,
Smaller
absolutely.
organization,
Because I was just thinking, because tomorrow down the line, if the government decides, okay, fine, let's implement it from September 1, I don't think organizations will be having much option to go before the government and say, oh, we were caught unaware. We were not aware
yeah,
that we are required to do
yeah.
something, because the government said that law is already there since past 5 years. You are required to ensure that those things are already put in place. Of course, there will be all those, representation by trade forums and all those things, and the government will be increasing the time limit. But at the same time, I would say, if we know this is going to be coming, then why not do it right now? Okay,
No, so
whatever can
the
be done, whatever can be done, whatever can be done, whatever can't be done, whatever there are interpretational issues, wherever you feel that this is something which is too ambiguous right now. So we can hold that, we can park that matter, but whatever is remaining is something that can be done.
And one more important interesting thing on RUG. See, earlier we were saying there's a political will is not there. Then there are so many states which are opposing it, which are, again, I don't want to sound political here, but we had these interpretation. But today, I think those things are also getting sorted. It's only West Bengal which has not notified any court today. Delhi,
Yeah.
we all know, will be in line very soon. It's a matter of days or a weeks or a month or
Yeah.
two. Delhi will be notifying all the all the routes. What's left? One law, one rule in Tamil Nadu, uh, Lakshadweep, Nagaland. That's a small piece for government to handle. Moment they decide that they want to do it, they would be able to force it. Only West Bengal is the one state which is left, where they have not draft. They have not notified the note. Not that they have not drafted it. They have drafted it, but they have not notified.
Yeah.
So I think one has to now start looking at it's coming up.
Yeah.
Just a matter of time.
Absolutely, absolutely. So one question that I keep on receiving is, I have got multiple offices in different states. Whether I would be required to comply with every of those rules? The answer I would say would be, again, how the government roll out the term appropriate government. Because I remember in gratuity, they specifically mentioned that in case you have multiple offices, then for you the appropriate government will be central government, in which case the central rules will apply. But in case you have offices only in single region, then in such case the relevant state would be applicable. So we'll have to see how those rules are carved out and how they define the term appropriate government. Someone mentioned that on the PF part, that you mentioned that there's an option to limit the PF contribution to basic. Yes, that option is there, but again, proper planning and structuring has to be done on that. And the basis for this is not only the PF scheme, rather I would say we will also have to take into consideration the apex court ruling on such matters, wherein they have said that wherever the employees are not or already contributing on a mandatory basis, they do have the option to reduce the salary to the threshold limit. So that option can be explored. Of course, whether there will be any filing requirement with the EPFO, whether any changes are required to be done in the policy, is something that can be looked at. In case we have covered everything, all the queries have been answered, then we can look at wrapping up the session.
Yeah, so there's one last point which I want to cover. How should an organization start preparing for it? My point is, you have to start looking at preparing yourself by start look individually for your organization, because every organization will have different dynamics. See, it's not just about, this is my personal experience I'm sharing. It's not just about laws and compliance. Depending on, sometimes you say it's very easy for an IT company to comply with. Sometimes change management will become more tougher there. Okay, because of the size and scale of the operations. So you have to start consulting, understand what is required for in your specific scenario, and then prepare a roadmap. And I think it's high time you have to have the clarity on roadmap. Changes wherever, as Anurag mentioned, wherever it is clear, you can start rolling those changes right now. Yeah, Guru, I will Anurag's contact details on the next slide. We can so you can take a screenshot. Great, thank you so much. And as Anurag mentioned, we just we have just touched the surface right now. It's too vast, too much that we can think of covering in 1.5 hours. But I think we may do more session as we get some more, we start getting some more clarity. And as we are also talking to more and more clients, they will we are also learning different scenarios. The more and more scenarios we learn, we may keep coming back to you with these sessions. So, and in case you have any queries, you have Anurag's, you can reach out to Anurag. You have his number. You have our IDs, our numbers. Feel free to reach out. We will keep. We'll start planning for them. Thank you so much, everyone. And once again, it was a pleasure to keep hosting you with our 25th webinar in the series. Keep giving us your best wishes, support, feedbacks as we aim for the 50th from now onwards. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks.
Thanks, Anurag. Have a
Bye.
good day,
Have a
everyone.
nice day.